Daimonosophy. Are angels models to be emulated? Is the purpose of man to become something greater than he already is? Can man somehow transform into the image of the divine? And where does one seek to find help in attaining such keys of transformation? These questions and many answers will be discussed with my guest, Sakaki IV of the Esoteric Order of Beelzebub.
Hello everyone, I'm Mona Magick, and I have with me my guest, Sakaki. Hello Sakaki, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm wonderful. How are you, Mona?
I'm just doing great. It's an honor to have you on my show because after reading your book, I have to say that you are a man who has done lots of research and lots of time, put lots of time into all that you represent, all that you have actually done over the years. Can you give me just let's just say a back in time as to how far you've actually come to this point in time within the path that you actually walk today?
Well, I suppose it starts somewhere in my teenage years in the 80s, where I was, after some dabbling around in various occult and spiritualist sorts of books that were available at the time, I found a copy of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. And I found that this really put things into perspective, that this was talking about more than simply some spells to do this or that, that it was talking about a comprehensive, integrated approach to life and to living a more effective life and to gaining more value from the experience of living here on planet Earth. So, so that was a very influential thing, and then I also discovered, some of the writings of Aleister Crowley, which I felt there was definitely, there's something within that. The ideas of thelema and will are all very, very significant. And then at some point towards the late 80s, I discovered an organization called the Temple of Set, which is a premier left-hand path organization, which further helped concretize a lot of the ideas that I was working with. And take basically the idea of rational self-interest, which is sort of at the center of traditional Satanism and Anton LaVey's philosophy, and take that idea to the level of supra-rational self-interest, that mankind's existence, while it may be defined by rational self-interest, that we do have the possibility of becoming something more. And within Setian philosophy, this is summarized with the term kefer, which is an Egyptian verb which means to become. So I guess that's really it in a nutshell. And then my further experiences and work within the Setian context led to the ideas which flowered into the Esoteric Order of Beelzebub, which is an order of the Temple of Set, which suggests certain perspectives or approaches to the idea of kefer, and much of that is what is encompassed in the book Daimonosophy.
Yes, indeed. And that leads me to your book, Daimonosophy. I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it wasn't the typical book that made me feel that I was trying to, that it was leading to a cookbook. It wasn't a cookbook per se. It actually forced you to actually bring a whole lot more of yourself into the forefront rather than looking to a itemized, recipe book of this is how you do this, this, and that. Within your book, you reference a lot of going within, and I don't think many people really want that these days, but when it turns out that they go to the other books, they realize they actually have to turn within. Can you elaborate on the premise behind Daimonosophy, because it dissects a lot of, let's just say, the inner psyche, the inner soul, and then coming out to really bringing out the manifestation of what one really wants to get out of this.
Well, absolutely. You bring up some really good points there, and one of the premises behind a book like Daimonosophy, and one of the premises behind a lot of left-hand path literature, left-hand path ideas, is that this is not for everybody, and that it doesn't need to be for everybody. That the ideas contained in here are going to resonate with certain people, and if it resonates with those who need to seek them out and pursue that further, then so be it. So it's most certainly Daimonosophy is a book that was not written for all. It's a very specified field of study, field of inquiry, field of spiritual exploration, and one of the really significant things that you mentioned about it is the idea that it begins with looking inside. So as simple and as basic as that might sound to you and sound to a lot of people, it's not really the case that most people are prepared to do that or even looking for that. Most of the things that you find in society, most of the ordinary common influences are about looking outside, about pursuing things, pursuing superficial things. So, and there's nothing wrong with pursuing wealth or material wealth. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But the point is that the experience of transformation, coming into being as a more real and a more stable individual, requires certain work that begins with, again, that internal look, that deep dive into what am I comprised of? What are my real values? And when you begin looking within yourself, one of the first things you start to realize is that a lot of what's in there is not things that you came up with, that weren't your idea. There's a lot of external influences that you've accumulated over the years from living within society, living on planet Earth. And so, right away, you realize that you need to start making some changes in how you approach things. Because if everything that I'm doing in the real world is a reaction on what's inside of me, and what's inside of me is not really me, then that means I'm not really living my own life. Okay. And my existence here on the planet would be a waste if it wasn't my own life. So before I spend any more time or invest any more effort in whatever it is I'm trying to do here, I need to make a deep dive and find out who I really am. At least get closer to that. At least get closer to that ideal. So that's why the suggestion in Daimonosophy is, before one goes out and starts casting spells, I want this, I want that, really you need to stop and take a really careful, close, in-depth assessment of who you are, and only then will you really have a good idea of what it is you want out of this life.
Indeed. What happens after you do know who you are? I know many out there will rush to invoke or evoke, go through evocation. How would you suggest to actually work with the external, internal, if someone is invoking or evoking?
Well, I think that there's an exchange that continues over a period of time. So this is another thing about the left-hand path as I have come to experience it, and as I try to portray in the book to some extent, is that it's not a matter of finding the right words and the right spells and the right key, and then you turn a key and then everything's fine. It's a long-term pursuit. It's a lifetime pursuit, because I look within myself and I gain a perspective of who I am and what I am, and perhaps that gives me some direction. I'm going to go out, now I'm going to go out into the external world and experience that and learn new things. Well, as I go out there and I learn new things, that changes who I am. And so then, necessitating the need for further internal reflection. So as far as invocation, evocation, I kind of look at that in terms of, whether I'm looking internally or whether I'm looking out externally, which I kind of talk about in terms of microcosmic work versus iocosmic work, within the magical system suggested in Daimonosophy, and that really the lifelong pursuit, or what perhaps Aleister Crowley might have called the great work, is a lifelong dedication to understanding the self, to seeing the self as it truly is, and to maximizing the experience of that self existing in this world.
I see. What do you normally like to work with? Do you like to work with, you prefer to work with, let's say, angelic or demonic forces?
Well, I would say that, and I would say that the mythology
indeed.
of what I call the Luciferian Exodus, which is this story of, you know, Lucifer and the rebellious angels having a falling out with their friends in heaven, and so they make this decision, well, we're going to leave, we're going to go somewhere else, and so they have a big conflict, and then they traverse the outer darkness into the great unknown, traveling across the void, and they find a new place called Pandemonium, and they establish a new palace there, a new paradigm of existence. And this story is something that's always really fascinated me. And the interesting thing about this story is that you've heard this story, I've heard this story, everyone's heard this story. And it's not really a story that's in the Bible per se. That particular scenario is not in the Bible, but then it gets written about by, you know, John Milton during the Enlightenment in the book Paradise Lost. And then there's other versions of it. Mark Twain refers to it. And there's all sorts of comic books, you know, in the graphic novel world right now that draw upon this theme. And it's kind of really come down to us as sort of a folk tale of a sort of cosmic thing that happened. And I find that really, really fascinating. And because it's like one of the mythologies that we have that talks about how a society works and how an individual deals with the collective of society. How an individual can continue to exist in that context. And what it suggests is that an individual in that context has to find a few other people, because we all know it's not all the angels that rebel and leave heaven, because that would be ridiculous. Then there wouldn't be anything to rebel against anymore. But it's a small group of them, sort of fueled or awakened by the revelations of an individual and revelations about the idea of individuality, the promise of an individual existence. And so a small group, a few people, or daemons as it are, realize that working together they can escape and they can get out of this context and they can go start another context. So that's sort of a theme or a meme. Some have said that this is a meme, or the Luciferian memeplex. Is something that's always intrigued me. I see it appearing in all sorts of cultural and literary manifestations, and of course it appears in the book Daimonosophy in a variety of ways.
So are you making a let's just say, are you implying a neutral, or let's just say a seamless, or let's say a fine line type of force, or are you actually dividing the two and going, quote unquote, with the actual folklore, if you will? How are you choosing sides, or are you actually giving, let's say, merit to this information of past? Because, you know, honestly, unless we were there, unless we actually visit, we really cannot say that it is.
Oh, right. So whether or not these things literally happened at some point in history, and I think that's a question that we can't answer here. And if we take it in terms of mythology, if we consider this mythology, like we talk about, you know, the mythology of Hercules or the mythology of Odin, the myth of Little Red Riding Hood. You know, when we talk about things like this, it starts to become ridiculous to suggest that whether it's absolutely objectively true or scientifically true, really becomes irrelevant, because we all know that, you know, science is very important. That's one of the main reasons that, you know, the human race is moving as far as it can, because we decided to be very objective and very rational in regards to these things. But at the same time, as humans, we need our emotions and we need our passions fueled, and we need them fueled in positive and constructive ways. And we find that people are better people when they are able to do this with mythological material that contains, you know, good values and lessons about how we can deal with life and how we can succeed in life and these sorts of things. So I guess to come back to your question, if that answers your question, I don't suggest that anywhere that demons are real or angels are real, or that when one gets involved with these magical rituals that you will objectively make contact with beings from another dimension. I don't discount the possibility of that, but I have to say, well, this is something that I can't convince anyone else of the truth of, so I'm not spending an awful lot of time trying to do that. And the other thing is that I don't think it's necessary to do that in order to begin following a path of coming into being, to follow a path of coming into one's own existence as a more godlike being, as a more complete being. It's unnecessary to postulate the existence of beings that may or may not exist. I believe that this is one of the errors that traditional Christianity, or right-hand path religion in general, has made over the aeons, and I don't think that for us to go and make that same mistake, but make it with like a different mythological characters sitting on the throne is going to be desirable or effective. And again, it's unnecessary for us to do this. When we look at history, we see all these systems that have done that have created huge movements that really are just based on a fantasy. And they started out as mythology, but somewhere somewhere along the lines, people decided, you know, people have to literally believe in this, even in the face of like science. They have to believe in it, or else they're basically heretics and they're criminals. And we don't have to spend much time talking about the history of mankind's warfare and bloodshed that is even going on today, based upon disagreements that have over beings that may or may not exist. So I don't see the aim of the left-hand path, and certainly not the aim of Daimonosophy, to prove the existence of anything like this. Let's talk about the mythology. Let's talk about the patterns that we find existing in the cosmos and in ourselves. And let's talk about how those are relevant and how we can maximize our experience to make ourselves better beings, and maybe make the world a slightly better place along the way as well.
So, in respect to patterns, in your book you do go and you mention about groups, esoteric groups, and really I find many groups a collective, let's say, matchmaking area, where is that you pick certain groups that resonate with you, pick certain groups that really empower you or help you empower yourself. How do you suggest to really combine all of that without really developing some type of self-conflict within your own? Because as you know, humans really connect to certain areas, and they like to be loyal to certain groups, and having one area of saying, you know, I don't want to do this, you know, I have to do a ritual on this day, or I must, you know, work with this particular god or demon, or whatever the case may be. How do you suggest that people actually combine all of this? Because collectively, everyone is, you know, everyone has their own, let's just say, starting point spiritually. That sometimes is overlooked from a let's just say, a mundane perspective when you join other groups and thinking that you've got to do certain, you know, X, Y, Z in order to maintain a certain type of, level in that group. You end up almost having to be a solitary, you know, for the most part.
Absolutely. Well, you know, the desire to pursue these things it always comes back to an individual desire. And I think most people who find themselves on this path, or on a path of exploration, self-discovery, they can always trace it back to a point in their time where they had a grand revelation, and they had a blinding flash of light. People will talk about these experiences that they have very passionately, and people find that individually. They find that personally, and ultimately the pursuit is very individualistic and very personal. And I can say that was my experience going back to my days in the 80s of pursuing LaVeyan Satanism, is that I did this almost entirely on my own. Very, very, very much an individual pursuit. And what you find over time is that as you pursue these things, as you go through life and you accumulate these influences, some of these influences have sort of almost a magnetic quality as you sort of gather them within your being, and they increase the likelihood of you coming in contact with other people who are also gathering some of these same influences. And then what you find through experience, eventually you may come in contact with a circle of people who are working with these same ideas. And what you find is that when there's a group of people working together, and they're working together consensually and voluntarily, that this suddenly the energy that you have is multiplied 1,000-fold. Suddenly there's an incredible boost of energy and possibility, and in addition to that, you have the benefit of being able to discuss your ideas with other people who are going through the same thing. Again, I'll go back to the mythology of the demons rebelling and leaving heaven. There's not just one of them. Lucifer doesn't just go by himself. He might start out by himself, but no, there's a group of them that go together eventually. So
that's quite interesting, what you've just said, and that also too leads me to where people are today. What's your take on many of the organizations that you know of today, and we won't name any names? Do you see any mistakes that's going on that people may end up back to square one? Because from where I'm standing, from what I can actually see, you've got a lot of people feeling that they can get really magic in a box, magic in a in a quick membership. Today it's almost like rubbing a genie, and I'm really thinking that people are really having a self-destructive mechanism inside them, because you surely really cannot expect anyone to really make so many commitments, at least spiritually, and not really prepare themselves. It's almost like having some type of substance abuse and having an escalation, and then really coming to that part where they're not really prepared internally, not really prepared psychologically.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of that going on today, but I guess we're talking about various occult groups and New Age groups and spiritualist groups, and there's really culturally been a steady growth of things like this since, I guess, probably sometime in the middle 19th century, in the 1800s in Europe, and then over into America. Starting with Theosophy, and then going into the Golden Dawn, and then an explosion of Wicca and other things that appeal to baby boomers in the 60s. So and there's even more today. And I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. One, I agree that a lot of them are not really pursuing a path, as I would call it. It's certainly not the left-hand path, or a way of real self-deification, because, as you mentioned, it's always kind of focused on a quick and easy sort of thing, and people just want to pick up little aspects of personality, represent their personality in various ways, and there's nothing wrong with that, really. I mean, we do things like that all the time. We want to we want to look good, we want to feel good. I want to wear, this color of shirt, or, wear this kind of ring, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, but really, it's a different sort of pursuit. Simply that's what it comes down to. It's a different sort of activity than pursuing initiation, what I call self-initiation. It's a different sort of activity, and it's a different sort of perspective. So I think it's important to, for me to not confuse the two of them. And one of the things I wanted to kind of point out in Daimonosophy is sort of highlight the difference between these types of pursuits, and that really the pursuit of self-initiation, self-deification is really sort of a long-term interest in, again, things that are not really that sexy, looking within the self, taking a stock of who we are on the inside. Now, on the other hand, the appearance of all these groups within this day and age, let's say, is sort of a good thing, because it represents that the hold of monotheism, which has generally been deleterious for culture. It's been deleterious for, the evolution of technology and economies and all of these sorts of things. Is sort of losing some of its influence, and that groups like this are allowed to exist now. I mean, back, several hundred years prior to that, groups like this would not even be allowed to exist. People involved with them would be, tried and convicted and burned at the stake or hung or persecuted or, what have you. So the fact that things like this exist now, in one sense, it's a good thing, and I like to see that. I saw, the tarot card deck for sale in Urban Outfitters a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, well, that's like really different. And I'm kind of a fan of the tarot. I like the tarot. And I never expected to see that in Urban Outfitters. But again, it's like I kind of look at it, it's in one way, it's like, that's weird seeing that there. But at the same time, it's like, well, okay. I mean, these influences are getting out there. And it kind of goes back, I think something that you said is that the more all these things seem to get out there, it's harder to see how much value. It's almost like they're losing value the more available everything is. And in one sense, that's true. But what that means is that for those of us who are seeking that value, we're on that alchemical search for gold, that we need to look a little bit harder, and we need to remember that, oh, really, we're supposed to be looking within ourselves for the gold, not out there and worrying about what everyone else is doing. That it all begins with like returning to ourselves and looking within.
Sure, I wanted to really dive into something that I feel that was quite significant throughout your whole book, and that is the transformation of soul, transformation and really emulating, let's just say, a higher presence of what we could possibly amount to, what we could possibly become. Can you elaborate on that? Because throughout your book, you suggest that there is a more in-depth us that we can actually seek through, possibly through the system that you do offer, and possibly through, the systems that other people, possibly would seek through their paths. But through the book Daimonosophy, you do suggest that there is a way, there is a possibility that we could possibly transform ourselves into a, let's say, more enhanced being.
So there's this old idea about the struggle between essence and personality. So two aspects of ourselves. And I like in Egyptian mythology, they talk about the struggle between Set and Horus, which is the oldest, it's like the oldest example of theater in the world, the oldest play in the world. Even before the Greeks started doing their tragedies and whatnot, the Egyptians were doing this play that's about the conflict between Set and Horus. And what this mythologically symbolizes to me is a struggle between essence and personality. So and those are both aspects of the self. And so what are those? Well, essence is what you are born with, what you come into this world with. And your personality is what you acquire, what you learn. So if you observe how humans develop from a very early age, babies, you know, the way babies like look at the world and their eyes are wide open and they're just amazed with everything. And they are basically just themselves. They are purely their own essence. They have not acquired any sort of personality features. And of course, after a couple of years, it starts to change really fast. They learn to interact with their parents, and they start to learn language. And then you get a little older, and you start to learn there's good things you can do, and there's bad things you can do. And you start devising ways to deal with this, and you learn about language and certain, you know, and you start to acquire all these personality features. And by the time we become adults, personality has completely grown over our essence, just completely enshrouded it. And that really all we are is a bunch of personality stuff that appears in the forms of different eyes, different personalities, which lead us this way and that, and respond to different external influences. You know, something leads us this way, someone else leads us that way, and we're just pushed and pulled, and so we go through life with no will and no direction. So our essence is still in there somewhere. So this is why we talk about the importance of looking inside, and going inside to look. And so what really needs to happen, and that unfortunately there's not just one incantation you can read that just makes this happen, but what needs to occur is that essence needs to be connected with again, and personality needs to lose a little bit of power in leading us around. So Amalthus in his book The Black Ship talks about some methodologies for basically doing this, where you essentially find one aspect of yourself that you put in charge of this, one aspect of yourself that is just obsessed with the idea of initiatory work and obsessed with the idea of becoming a real person. So once you realize how false everything in your life is, many people have a huge revelation about this, and they realize the only thing you can hope for is to try and become a real person and see through personality. So you set one aspect of yourself in charge of this that just wants to like be that, wants to return to essence more than anything. So the idea is that over time, over work, then the effect of personality sort of begins to thin out a little bit. And maybe as an ideal, we can say, maybe someday it will be gone entirely and I will be just my essence. Or rather, my essence will lead. My essence will lead and the personality will follow, which is different. Right now, personality leads and your essence is like pulled along with it. But once essence gets to that point where personality is not suffocating it, then essence can begin to grow a little bit. Okay? And so that's where we talk about, oh, maybe I'm becoming more like a god. Maybe I can actually start to grow into something and become something. All I'm really doing is allowing essence to grow like naturally it would anyhow. Naturally it would do that anyhow if society, our existence in society wasn't so screwed up and there wasn't so many factions and interests in society that want to control us and want us to be a certain thing and, you know, put us through the meat grinder of, you know, public school and all these other sorts of things. So that's kind of the idea. Just get to a point where personality is no longer strangling us and allow essence to grow as it should be, as it could be, as it wants to be.
I see. So with that, we could amount to being much more than what we have actually digressed to, because it appears that we start off at one point and we digress based on, I guess, external, you know, the mundane elements that that sort of pick at us and chip away our true selves, chip away really our being that we could be, but then we, in a way, lose ourselves to what we were originally planned to be. Would that be pretty much along the lines that you're speaking about?
Absolutely. There's an old saying, I think it's a Sufi saying, that You know, right now you make grape juice when you could make wine. And we all had the ability to produce wine, to produce something finer and finer and better. We all have that, but we produce something lower. And so in a really simple way, that is what the left-hand path is about. That is what initiation is about. That's the suggestion, the methodology that's suggested in Daimonosophy, that we can get back to a point where we can produce something significant, and because we are something significant.
Indeed. Well, once one is on a path of doing that, what do you suggest to going further within that path line? Because I know that, you know, people will have that epiphany, whereas that they actually feel that light, that feeling within, and that spark to say, here, you know, I've actually done it. Is it to reach for more and more, or is it to reach from here and there? Where does it stop? Are you trying to go to a point of, let's say, being immortal? Is it a sense of manifestation of empowerment here and there? What would you say would be the plateau of a state of being at this point? And I know that's probably an unfair question, but it's probably an unfair question. But what I'm asking is that you've got people who are currently, let's just say, going onto the left-hand path because they figure that it gives them power, it gives them, you know, that sense of, let's say, the taboo that will give them that raw appeal. And then you've got people who dwell within inside and know that it's inside out. But even with religion, there is let's just say, a light at the end of the tunnel. There is something to grasp, something to want, that goal. What goal are we talking about here?
Well, the possibility of immortality, that's something that's out there. Perhaps there is an existence beyond this, but again, it's like saying, oh well, there's definitely like entities out there that I can scientifically prove. You have to realize when you're talking about immortality that you're talking about something that's not verifiable, and it's pretty speculative. Now you can say, well, I believe in it, and I'm sure that's it, and that's like what I work for. Well, I guess the proof is in the pudding. If someone needs to like work in that direction, and if that's what they need to fuel them, then that is fine. But that sort of realization is not really the sort of realization that the ideas in Daimonosophy are based on. The sort of realization that Daimonosophy centers around more is the realization of, again, I realized I've been making grape juice all my life when really I could have made wine. So my thought is like, well, let's focus on that. Let's focus on that, because the reality for most people is that we're unable to do even very, very simple things. We're unable to do effectively. I mean, we forget appointments, and we, you know, just make ridiculous mistakes like all the time. But then as someone once said, people talk about immortality, but they don't know what to do with themselves on a Sunday afternoon. So we really have problems with this just really simple, basic things, let alone determining how we're going to exist for all eternity, and even dealing with the philosophical problems of, well, where is that going to be at, where we exist for all eternity, and how does that all work out with the laws of physics and all that. I mean, there's just a lot of questions in that we just have to come back and say, you know, I think that's beyond us, and we have to realize that a lot of these monotheistic religions have been controlling mankind for centuries and centuries by saying, well, hey, I know what happens when you die, and what happens is you better do what I say now. And you know, using these sorts of things to just basically keep people in fear and control them. So to me, one of the things that you have to realize is that we really want to get to a point where we can like handle like just really simple things and be more effective with just the really basic things in life. And there are reminders of that all around. And you touched on this yourself when you see other people in life who are just their existence is just largely mechanical. They exist like robots. And this is not an opportunity for me to judge them because they're just doing what makes sense to them in their context. But that's a reminder to me that, oh yeah, I wanted to have an existence that was more significant than that. I don't want to be a robot, an automaton. I want to be a real person. I want to be able to make decisions that are really my own decisions, that are really in my own best interest. I want to achieve things. If I earn things, I want to be able to keep it for myself and all of these sorts of things. And that is really the fire. That is the need fire from which most of the ideas in Daimonosophy grew.
Daimonosophy appears to bring out more in depth of a psychological and a conscious status of the left-hand path, more so than the actual mechanical aspect, from my perspective, from what I've read. And with that, I also saw that I'm not sure if it was your intent, but I also see a slightly scientific aspect of it, or a more holistic aspect of it from the mind, dealing with a little bit of science, going forward. With my interpretation of what Daimonosophy is and how it's going in that direction, would you say that a lot of what the left-hand path does today could possibly use a whole lot more conscious awareness of exercising the mind, per se, and the psyche of the mind to really go a lot further? Or would it be more of a mechanical aspect of ritual? Because I struggle sometimes and wonder about how much rituals in my mind than it is actual manifestation of connecting to spirit and being, if you get where I'm coming from.
Well, I think consciousness, in the sense of self-awareness, is absolutely central to the process of self-initiation, to the process of Kefir. It revolves around the idea of consciousness, and that is that's the facet of our existence that we learn that we lack that. We lack the ability to remain conscious of ourselves, of our will, of our existence, of our aim and our focus in life. And that's why we're ordinarily unable to complete things. We have so many unfinished lines of work. We can't remain conscious of them. So in the large sense, yes, much of the work comes down to consciousness, to being aware. That is the thing when essence grows, when we become more of a real being. We're also talking about becoming a more conscious being, and it's also worth some time studying what consciousness really is, because we initially think of that term in relation only to the intellect, that it is the mind that is conscious. But consciousness is more holistic than that, really, and something that some of the exercises in Daimonosophy are geared towards this. That there's consciousness within the heart, and then there's consciousness and awareness within the body in the form of sensation, and that actually much of the work and the meditational practices that are suggested begin with that, with developing our awareness of sensation within the body. So consciousness is a very large thing, and really is at the forefront of all of this.
I see. So I suppose that it's more of an advanced level because normally the people I've seen out there don't really want to give the consciousness the time of day. You know, they really just want to go ahead and read what they need to do and you know, get on with it. So I would really urge people to actually pick up your book because it gives you a real, I guess, a huge mirror to look inside and to say, okay, stop, I've got to do this first before I do that. It's really apparent. And I was just wondering, can you give me an example, if you have an example of what you've actually experienced or met, or even yourself, to someone who's actually amounted to such an awareness that you can say, well, aha, you know, it is not something that I'm writing about or something that I'm just thinking about, but I've actually met or I'm experiencing this.
Well, I was working with some people once, with a group of people who were interested in these ideas of achieving consciousness and work on the self and these sorts of things. And we'd had some stuff in there was a refrigerator in this cabin where we were staying, and a bunch of you know, materials were in the refrigerator. We weren't paying attention to it, and we were doing some other work outside. And then when we came inside and opened up the freezer, the whole like back part of it was like all completely iced over. I've never seen this. And one of the people that was there, who is a person who I consider to be generally a conscious person, or at least more conscious than me, someone who I considered a teacher. They looked at the ice, and then they took an ice pick. He went up there with a hammer, and he made like one little tap, just ever so carefully. And it just cracked, and all of the ice like fell off of it. And to me, this was always an example of consciousness in action, because the way I would have done it is, well, just take that ice pick and go up there and start jamming on it, and I probably would have taken 5 hours to get all of the ice chipped off of it. But he just went up there with it, and so that's sort of a representation of consciousness to me. That, like, okay, so you realize just the right amount of effort that was needed was just apparent. You know, not too much force, not too little force, just the right amount.
I see. Yes, indeed. I can see how that is quite significant of you know, how people really overdo things when they really don't have to. So you're right. He put it right on the nail. You actually performed a ritual within this book, and you mentioned how significant it is, and you've given the pathways to that. Can you elaborate on some of the experiences that you've experienced within the ritual that you've mentioned to actually, I believe you call it the blessing within the book?
The basement working?
Yes, indeed.
The basement working. So what happened during the basement working, and for those that haven't read this yet, and this is a this was a pure goetic style of working, where you draw a circle on the floor, and you light a candle, and you say these incantations, and then a demon is supposed to appear. And then you tell the demon what you want. And, you know, we're 13, 14-year-old kids, so I'm sure we're telling the demon things that are pretty ridiculous in retrospect as far as what we want out of life, which is another problem with the whole concept of operative magic like that, is that people want all these things, but really they don't even know what they want. How ridiculous is it that people are like trying to use magic to achieve things they want, and they don't even know what they want? So, anyhow, what I wanted from that is somehow lost to me, and the experience that I had from that rite was very bizarre, and I consider this my blinding flash of inspiration for the time period, where there was a sort of a visual apparition and what seemed to be material things like happening, and it was really the thing that changed my perspective, because it left me with this huge question, about what is reality comprised of? What do I really want out of reality? What am I really seeking? Why do some people seek these forbidden, hidden things and others are not interested in them? And all of these questions and all of these things just sort of became guiding questions for me. And after that time period, I no longer did, spells or pursued that line of interest that you see in the occult world of casting spells and doing these like magical systems and everything like that. And going forward from there, I always had this sense that there's something higher within all this, and that the questions that I gained from it are what have kind of guided me from there. And it also comes back to, it's really that sense of question that we gain about things is actually one of the most important things that we have. The traditional way people approach a question is, well, I have a question about this, and then I get an answer, and then so I know more about the world. But in reality, it's simply the question of being. Just being in a state of question is one of the most significant places that you can be, because then you're in an open state, then you can receive something higher, perhaps. And so that's all of these things go back to that basement working for me.
I see. How does the Esoteric Order of Beelzebub align with the writings that you have put in Daimonosophy?
I'm sorry, you cut out on me there. Can you repeat?
Sure.
Repeat.
How does your book align with the philosophies that you actually go through within the Esoteric Order of Beelzebub?
Well, a lot of the material that you find in Daimonosophy are ideas and essays that came out of my work in the Esoteric Order of Beelzebub. So, in one sense, what you see in Daimonosophy is sort of a document of the progression of ideas from my point of view within the order. There are other people in the order, and there are other ideas that move around in the order, but the order tends to center around the ideas of the incompleteness of being, which comes up in the statement of Beelzebub in the Diabolocon. It comes up, or it centers around the core values of independence, inspiration, and invention. And it also tends to center around the idea of the black flame, the idea of there being a cosmic or universal substance that is the evolutionary piece that inspired man's consciousness or intelligence to grow to a certain level, perhaps based on intervention from other beings, where we start to move into a more mythological sort of representation of things.
I see. Do you feel that? And I know again, this may be an unfair question for you, but I'm under the impression that as we evolve consciously and subconsciously, that possibly we may change biologically to some degree, or we may evolve to being, quote unquote, probably different beings. Do you feel that way? Or I'm just asking I just figured to ask because I figured you may be at a place to answer that or help clarify that, because we truly have to, if we are evolving spiritually, truly that has some type of physical effect in our minds and how how we interact and grow as people.
I think it's very possible. We see that Homo sapiens have evolved from Neanderthal and other lines of of biological beings over the centuries or aeons. I mean, huge stretches of time. So I do think that it's entirely possible. And within a short stretch of time, we know that we can tell that humans are on average shorter in height than they used to be, and every time we decide that, oh, here's the first intelligent example of human beings, the first Homo sapiens. We used to think it was like 10,000 BC when I was like younger is the figure that I always heard, but now it's like something like 100,000 BC or beyond. I mean, anthropology and archaeology keeps finding new examples that humans or some sort of manifestation of humans have been around just far longer than we ever suspected. We've been in the world for a really, 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 really long time, and we've changed during that time period. So there's no reason for us to say that we know for certain we're not going to evolve further. But we know, of course, from looking back on this, that evolutionary things like that occur very gradually over very long periods of time. So I don't think within our lifetime, I don't think we're going to see people born with a third eye in their forehead or something. But I do think I do think it's entirely possible. And the other thing that keeps coming up is in this day and age is the possibility of space migration and how that can change things. I mean, people used to think a very short time ago, relatively, that no one would ever travel to the moon. But here that's happened, and we have people orbiting the Earth in space in a space station on a daily basis, and now we have private industry with SpaceX and Elon Musk and all these other organizations that are looking at getting us to Mars before long. So I think that there's a lot of really, really amazing possibilities happening in the world right now for humanity, and we don't need to dig too deeply to see some of that possibility.
Do you see any of that crossing over into how the left-hand paths, let's just say path is going to be tomorrow? Because you're talking about technology and a cross between consciousness and spirituality. Putting the three of those together, and even today you put social media together along with how people go, and you put electromagnetic forces going in between just energy period. Do you see that really transforming into something else within the left-hand path? Because as you mentioned, even Urban Outfitters, with the tarot deck there, you don't know what's tomorrow for everything out there. It seems like it's actually just evolving to a place that won't be, that's not present today, at least.
I think it is, and the values that the left-hand path tends to sit around are values, again, we talked about this before, rational self-interest. So these are values that center around, independence and inspiration and innovation. And we see that technology evolves more in an atmosphere under conditions that promote those sorts of values.
I see, right.
Right? So that's where you see the Enlightenment period in Europe that segued into the birth of America and free market and all of these sorts of things, and this incredible explosion of technology and advancement, and that's continuing. That's continuing to move, and some people consider technology and the growth of these things to be a negative aspect because there's implications for the environment. But we're learning ways to moderate that as we're going forward. And the reality is that world hunger is at the lowest level it's ever been since we've recorded history about world hunger. And this is entirely because of free markets and technology learning how to do things better and get more resources to more people. And at the same time, we're learning how to more effectively build rocket ships that can get to the moon or get to Mars. So, for me, this is connected with left-hand path ideas, because right-hand path ideas, which stress obedience and you know, sacrificing yourself for the collective. They had their chance. They had their 5,000 years of existing to show what they could do. And what did we have? Well, we had the Dark Ages, we had disease, we had pestilence, we had people burned at the stake and tortured, and just all these sorts of like horrible things. Okay, so the right-hand path, they really had their chance to show, to demonstrate to humanity why everyone should follow them, why everyone should follow that paradigm, accept that paradigm. And my feeling is that they have failed to do that. And one of the things that we see happening right now is the rise of, you know, radical Islam is happening over there. And as that rises, well, that's causing sort of in the West, certain elements in the West are sort of falling back into to combat that. They're sort of falling back into a monotheistic paradigm so they can go duke it out. And so that's sort of disturbing to watch that happen. But at this point in time, it's not really slowing the march. It's like the ability of people to work independently and to make things happen is sort of shaken off a certain amount of inertia that it can't really fully ever be pulled back down. It's like the Pandora's box of the left-hand path is really open and it's really out there. So I have a lot of excitement and faith about the future and seeing what's going to happen next.
I have to concur with that, and I do see a momentum of, as you mentioned and as you actually put it, sort of a Pandora's box, or, you know, just letting everything out, and it's actually having a sort of velocity that's actually going to spread out and explode to the point of true order, you know, in fact, I would have to say. Going forward, do you have anything that's coming up that, you know, because I know you've had your book, and I'm not sure exactly how long it took you to write this book, because I do know that this Daimonosophy is in, you know, well, it came after the Black Ship, and much of the Black Ship, well, I would say the philosophies or some of that stuff is inside this as well. Is there another book to come out, or is there something else that you are going to work towards in the next couple of months, up to a year?
The thing that I'm looking at right now is the possibility of what might become another book centered around the idea of Luciferian Exodus, which we talked about earlier. The mythology of the fallen angels, and how this is basically, this is a meme or a memeplex, which is draws from several memes within the psyche that we see repeated in culture.
Yes.
And you know, there's a spiritual, personal sort of manifestation of that, which is a lot of what we've talked about here today. And there's also a social manifestation of this actually happening in society. You know, societies, small societies. The founding of America is the one that I like to look at. A smaller group of like entities breaking away from larger countries and starting a new colony over here. That sort of things happens culturally. Again and again throughout history. So and so then there's also mythological or cosmic manifestations of it. So Luciferian Exodus will likely be the subject for another book before.
That sounds really exciting. You should have said that, because I tell you, I really want to read it. You know, yeah, I really do. It sounds very exciting, and I have to say that if it's as good as the book that you've just finished, Daimonosophy, and if it's as good as this book, then I would really urge you to hurry up and finish it so I can start on it, because it does sound really good. I want to thank you for, you know, your time. Do you have any last-minute thoughts or any words of advice for people who want to reach towards, you know, let's say, empowering themselves, escalating or evolving to, you know, to something better than what they are today?
Seek towards the mysteries within, and be confident in yourself, and seeing things as they really are, and know that your own wisdom will be your best guide.
Yes. Well, Thank
And
you.
I would like to thank you, Mona, for this opportunity to be able to chat here today. I've greatly enjoyed it, and I greatly enjoy all of your insights on it.
All right, great. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I'd love to have you back on your new book. That sounds already very exciting. So good luck on that, and until we meet again, all the best.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a man who had just been admitted into heaven by St. Peter, and he wanted to see his friend that had passed away several days earlier. He asked St. Peter, "Could you please tell me where I can find my friend that came here a few days ago? He was an engineer, very nice, and a good man." St. Peter looked in his book and told the man he had sent the engineer to hell. "That must be a mistake," said the man. "My engineer friend did so many good things on earth and designed things that helped many people while he was on earth." St. Peter checked his records, and sure enough, there had been a mistake. So he picked up the phone and he dialed hell. A moment later, Lucifer answered. "This is the supreme ruler of evil. How may I help you?" St. Peter said, "Look, Lucifer, the other day I sent you an engineer by mistake. I want you to send him back up here." Lucifer laughed and he told St. Peter, "There's no way I'm sending him back. In just the short time he's been here, he's installed cold water lines and a new air conditioning system." St. Peter demanded, "Lucifer, if you don't send him back up here, I'll take you before the galactic court and I'll sue you." Lucifer's laughter got even louder, and St. Peter asked him why he was laughing. Lucifer finally calmed down and said, "How do you expect to win in court? All the lawyers are down here with me." Today I want to talk about a concept that we have come to call Luciferian exodus, or as it has also been called, the Luciferian meme. The same idea was explored in an EOB working in Providence called Luciferian Exodus, and to poetically echo Magister Fitzsimmons' notion of the divine pattern of Set, one might also say that Luciferian Exodus reflects the divine pattern of Lucifer. Imagine, if you will, that within the mythology of Lucifer, his fall from heaven, subsequent journey with his Daimonic tribe to the realm called Pandemonium, we might find a pattern not only within the human psyche, but also within the realm of human interaction and conscious individual choice, a pattern that reiterates, in fact, on a variety of levels, opening doors to new understanding about the world within and to new possibilities in the world without. Some preliminary information on how these sorts of ideas seated in my own being, it has made me, for some strange reason, qualified to pontificate on such things. I didn't have a particularly religious upbringing. My father was an existentialist who had fallen away from the church. And when I say existentialist, I mean the whole Jack Kerouac Beat Generation package, beret, pipe, philosophizing, and so forth. So I didn't get a lot of religious dogma at home in my upbringing, but rather occasional cool stories from the Bible, like Samson, Noah, Lot, Cain, and Abel. I heard mythology from the Old Testament as frequently as I heard mythology from Greek myths, like Hercules or Icarus. But I was never subjected, fortunately, to any of the more fire and brimstone and salvation sorts of ideas that you find throughout the New Testament. So then, one summer evening, I'm running around with the neighborhood kids. I hear them tell this story about how Lucifer, who's also Satan, was at one time one of God's angels, his favorite angel, in fact, who rebelled and left heaven or was possibly cast out for his pride. I hadn't heard this story before, and something about it struck me as forbidden or secret. And something about it has stayed with me over the years, resonating every time I'd hear the story reiterated in sources like John Milton's Paradise Lost, Mark Twain's Letters from the Earth, and even more esoteric sources like the Diabolocon. In reality, it seems the more I've reflected on this pattern, the more I've seen it not only in literature and mythology, but also as a pattern that reiterates as a part of our life process. We grow, we separate from our families, we evolve socially, we mature and separate from social groups. We develop our knowledge and skills and separate from work environments in pursuit of greater opportunities and avenues of success. And perhaps even within the context of our spiritual evolution, as we emerge consciously and liberate ourselves from the inertia of the objective universe, which often manifests in the form of peers who seem sometimes to harbor a hidden wish that we not outperform them. What seems to separate this Luciferian perspective from ordinary life processes that lead to separation is the decision-making process that it entails. First, it's never an easy decision. It produces an internal struggle and often an intensive re-examination of one's own moral landscape. Secondly, this struggle and inquiry centers around the question of the individual versus the collective, or the organization. Some guiding questions emerge from this. Why do we sometimes feel the need to separate from groups? Indeed, sometimes it seems part of a natural progression. We see human adolescents separating from parents, seeking independence and autonomy. We see wolves separating from packs, and we honor this with the term lone wolf. Can separation then be a positive thing? Certainly we have values associated with growth and maturation. We also value learning from direct experience rather than simply being prescribed proper behavior. And of course, we value independence. Why does this separation seem to require struggle? And are there forces actually opposed to the pursuit of independence? We may here recall the idea of objective universe, laws, and cosmic inertia spoken of in the Book of Coming Forth by Night, where Set states, "Were I myself to displace the cosmic inertia, I should be forced to become a new measure of consistency. I would cease to be one, for I should become all." We may recall the ancient Egyptian myth of Set struggling to separate himself from the womb in an act of violence. In fourth wave literature, they talk about the prison allegory. The idea here is that man's state is such that he is in prison. If he's a reasonable man, he can have no greater wish than to escape. However, he cannot escape on his own because he needs help, resources, tools. He needs to make plans and so forth. So he needs to find the others who also wish to escape. But all cannot escape. It would be too obvious, and too great a force of inertia would rise against it. But a few can escape. A very relevant correspondence to the Luciferian pattern arises here. For while the myth may initially center around Lucifer, it is in fact a small band of fellows who actually make the escape, journeying across the darkness and founding together a new creative space called Pandemonium. A place for all daemons, a place for all independently conscious beings. Whenever an esoteric circle or a circle of those few who wish to escape is formed, the Luciferian pattern is reiterated. We begin to see the pattern has an individual aspect and a small group aspect. There's no collective or mass manifestation, but rather simple relationships of cooperation and collaboration. Remember that if all escape, there would be nothing to escape from. The danger of ceasing to be one is in becoming all, But in working with the few, we find a resource that also acts as a buffer. We see that first, the wish for independence arises within us at an individual level, as does the wish for consciousness. Later, it is activated in the social realm as we learn how to recognize allies and identify with others who we can connect with or collaborate with in relationships of reciprocal maintenance. Through experience, we further learn that our goals may shift and we may outgrow one group. Thus, the Luciferian pattern may reiterate and remanifest at increasing levels of expansion and complexity throughout our life and our initiatory process. We start to see that finding focus and aim for our will can arise simultaneously with the need to go beyond the boundaries of our current group affiliations, and that courage can be as valuable an asset as independence. There's a ton of literature out there in self-help and management and leadership genres about the most effective way to join a group or fit in with a group or to lead a group, but almost nothing on the most effective or the most intelligent way to leave a group or to identify and assess the need to leave a group. Perhaps in studying the mythological pattern of Lucifer's exodus, we can better understand our relationships with groups, possibly maximizing benefit for all parties and making better decisions about when and how to initiate exodus. A decision in favor of independence is central to the concept. In the Diabolocon, the weight of such a decision is discussed by Lucifer and Beelzebub, where Lucifer states, "Thou who knew not independence of will shall now be the first to realize these qualities. And thy response forebodes much, for had thou rejected the concept of challenge, I should have held my own thought for impossible delusion. For some, independence is almost instinctual and can inspire the same in others. Not in everyone, but certain others, with a certain proclivity, a certain resonance, or a certain vibratory frequency." As Beelzebub continues, "Of these words I knew little, but there dawned within me a quality which I had not known before, an impulse to become one, apart from and independent of God, and I drifted long in unrest, afflicted by confusion and doubt." The inclination toward independence can be at first frightening, the sense that you are moving off the map into unknown or even forbidden territory. But in resonating with the divine pattern of Lucifer, one might find the courage to move forward into the darkness. Returning for a moment to those childhood stories I heard about the fallen angel, I later learned that references to the Luciferian exodus in the Bible are indeed quite few. The word Lucifer appears only once in the Hebrew Bible, Isaiah 14:12. In modern English translations, Lucifer becomes morning star, referencing the planet Venus, as the initial conflict is described. "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." It is believed that this statement references rather a Babylonian king rather than a demonic entity. Here the myth is used as a warning to discourage deviation from the tribe, to mock and deride independence and achievements. We continue to find these sorts of discouragements and disincentives to prevent people from leaving or ascending from groups at a variety of levels, even in modern secular environments. But later, the first and second books of Enoch give Lucifer an expanded role, interpreting Isaiah 14 with its reference to the morning star as applicable to him, and presenting him as the fallen angel cast out of heaven for refusing, according to Jewish writings, to bow to Adam, of whom Satan was envious and jealous. Note also, it is in the apocryphal book of Enoch where the black flame is witnessed to come down from the sky and bathe the earth. In the neoclassical period of literature, John Milton gave us the epic Paradise Lost, which, according to Dr. Leonard Peikoff in his book The Dim Hypothesis, was from its first release a sensation. Here we see a very different light cast on the pattern. Of course, the most astonishing character in the entire poem is Satan, this defiant demon who rebels against God in the name of freedom from tyranny, of hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp, is presented by Milton at once as the incarnation of evil and at the same time as admirable and even heroic. In concretizing Satan's evil, Milton mentions but does not stress the demon's pride, malice, and guile. But in concretizing Satan's virtue, Milton does not pass over it quickly. He stresses Satan's strength, his intellect, his inventiveness, his courage, and even his sense of morality, shown by his regret over the necessity inherent in his war against God to seduce Adam and Eve. This character surely is the protagonist of the story, the initiator of the action at each turn, whereas God is passive. In effect, he puts out fires and voices disapproval from the sidelines. Satan is not sinfulness, but a worldly conflicted individual and individualist who, having left a stagnant tribe, attempts to breathe life into a new tribe. So we've seen this pattern occurring personally, metaphorically, perhaps even cosmically. What of practical value? Experience in ordinary life, the work world, the social realm, and so forth, may often remind us of the old adage, water seeks its own level. Most people find a comfortable level of balance and then remain there. Even if they complain about it regularly, they will tend to stay there, finding reasons or excuses to explain their failure to advance, and offering only critique or derision of those who do advance. Even those who pursue advancement or enrichment in their personal or spiritual lives will sometimes compartmentalize this other part of their existence, the workaday world, remaining simultaneously satisfied and resentful. This is why it may at times seem that members of our own tribe harbor a secret wish that we not succeed, that we not outperform them, outdo them, or grow beyond them. They may attempt to reinforce this with language and values. The reality is that man is a social animal, and we must interact with groups in order to live and thrive. But there's no reason we should allow ourselves to be strapped down or inhibited by a group. When faced with such situations, we have two options. We can try to change the people around us, helping them see the larger world around them, or we can take up the torch of Lucifer and leave. David Logan, the author of the book Tribal Leadership, describes this watershed moment in the journey toward success most succinctly. You literally cannot make this journey alone. Your tribe will either help you or prevent your forward movement. In fact, you can move forward only by bringing others with you. Tribes are more influential than individuals, no matter how smart or talented they are. As you move forward, either you will become a tribal leader, upgrading your tribe with you, or you will stall. The only exception to that rule is that there are people who have changed themselves by switching to a new tribe. How to identify a dumb tribe, a tribe that's not going anywhere? There are certain signs that a group is succumbing to inertia and is unlikely to go anywhere itself or help you get anywhere. In a toxic tribe, conspiracy theories abound. Conspiracies offering explanations about why no one here ever goes anywhere, why nothing ever changes, why no one should bother even trying to go somewhere. People's discussions will tend to focus on how they're being screwed by the system or by their leadership. A group can be united in this belief and united in their resistance to change. Complaints dominate conversations. Often, even if one of their favorite problems to complain about is somehow fixed, they quickly switch to another problem, or else focus on how the solution was somehow insincere or illegitimate. Ouspensky identified this particular negative energy circle in the tendency to express negative emotions. Such groups will seem to thrive on negative expressions, and they won't really fully trust any newcomers until they hear some negativity from them as well. You feel obligated to express negativity when interacting with members of groups like this. For the Americans in the audience, I'd point to the great example of the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't know what it's like in Europe. As an example of a group that has adopted this sort of static negativity in its dominant culture and is well beyond the possibility of evolution. You will be absorbed by such a group and descend to their mean level, or you will leave. Challenging such conspiracy theories and negative expressions directly is never effective. Denial of the conspiracy merely becomes proof of the vastness of the cover-up. Also, you can't really deny or negate another person's negativity. -1 plus -1 equals -2. It's a losing battle for everyone. Such groups are toxic. They will poison you, and they will keep you paralyzed at their level, or possibly even drag you in the opposite direction. The best approach is work that focuses on upgrading the culture with higher influences in language. Some groups can be changed. If it can be established that the group shares certain common core values, then this can become an incredible source of energy and an agent of growth. I'm sure most of us have experienced gossip in groups and know how deleterious this can be to groups and individuals. It feeds a cycle of negativity that drains all of the group's vitality. One of the secrets of the Black Magician is the power of positive gossip, saying positive things about people who happen to not be in the room at the time. Such acts not only cleanse and charge the flow of energy within groups, but also return to you individually, enhancing your status within the tribe. With positive gossip, you create win-win situations, upgrading your tribe and your own standing simultaneously. The art of bringing positive and transformative change at a tribal level is an art and science unto itself. But our first concern must always be for our own well-being, our own rational self-interest. This also means we must survive long enough to connect with groups that won't bleed us dry. Thus, it behooves us that we learn to identify as soon as possible such toxic tribes. In addition to certain language cues, another way of identifying such a tribe is actually quite similar to Anton LaVey's methodology for identifying a psychic vampire. We simply extend this methodology to a group context. This involves taking stock of the quality of energy within yourself. Do you feel energized from interaction with a group or drained? A toxic tribe will drain you, keeping you at their level. They'll find reasons to keep you in their presence, and they'll find ways to discourage you from leaving their grasp. Having identified such a tribe, you should immediately begin planning your exodus. You should do so without hesitation, without regret, and without mercy. Remember that in doing so, you act in your own self-interest, and for Ascetian, there is no higher moral expression. Often the threat of total isolation is one of the disincentives that an oppressive tribe will use to try and discourage us from independent thought or action. In some right-hand path religious groups, this is called shunning. If you leave, you can never come back, and you will be outcast forever. These echo of the same jeers that must have been thrust on Lucifer by the heavenly horde. But we see in studying the pattern, in theory and in practice, that total isolation is in fact never the case. There are always like-minded collaborators not far to be found, waiting only for the emergence of a hero in order to themselves flame to life with awareness of their own limitless potential. For after settling in pandemonium, it is the reordering of the very system itself which becomes the next item of interest for the daemons. As Beelzebub continues his tale of the Exodus in the Diabolocon. Through the gates of hell we passed, and many of us had supposed hell to be a new heaven, wherein Lucifer would become as God. But this was not to be, for the scene before us promised neither ease nor bliss. Everywhere was there imbalance and confusion, for no law ordered the shape of hell. And Lucifer said, "Lo, see that I am not God, and that we are each of us an isolate being. Here shall freedom be absolute, for hell itself shall reflect our several wills, never to be patterned apart from them. And in truth, hell was not constant, for each of us conceived it differently, and the result was a riotous pandemonium, with substance and motion behaving in a most bewildering and perplexing manner. And in spite of our deep hurt from the Great War, for Exodus is always a struggle and always deeply emotional, we succumb to merriment. So preposterous did our hell appear. Lucifer himself was transfixed with mirth, and he said, "It is apparent that we must reach concert upon the design of hell, else we shall perish in an endless labyrinth of our own several thoughts, an ignoble end to our experiment." In other words, voluntary collaboration is the system that replaces and in reality consistently outperforms any sort of rigid totalitarian power structure. He continues, "And I answered, Lord of light, to hell thou hast brought us, and in hell, though thou be not God, thy concepts shall be honored amongst our fellowship, for without thy gifts we should never have become as we are." And of course, the sharing of the black flame with humanity is not long to follow. Perhaps the greatest imaginable reordering of the system and integration of a new tribal paradigm, establishing the heroic ascendance of the self-conscious individual over a sea of collective mechanicalism. It is this great possibility of the reordering of the system that fuels entrepreneurs and heroes of present day not only to challenge the current system, but move boldly beyond its constraints into realms of hitherto undreamed of innovation and inspiration. Thank you very much.